A wedding gown hung in the corner of the room, like a spectral figure mocking Valor Wainwright's perception of his future. At 22 years old, his life was already being pledged to settle his father's debts. However, this wasn't a typical arrangement. Sterling Rhodes had been unambiguous. Marry the widow Lyra Thornwood, 30 years his senior, or forfeit the ranch that had been in Valor's family for 3 generations. Valor stood by the window of the small church, observing dust devils whirl across the desolate landscape. He fidgeted, his hands trembling as he adjusted the collar of his only presentable shirt. The men in town whispered behind his back, labeling him everything from desperate to pitiable. Some even chuckled, claiming he had secured a mother rather than a wife, but none of them grasped the weight pressing down on his chest. His father had squandered everything on a disastrous cattle drive, leaving behind debts that would take decades to repay. Sterling Rhodes now owned half the territory and collected on every obligation with ruthless efficiency. When Rhodes had proposed this solution, Valor had been tempted to strike him. Instead, he'd stood there, weak and submissive, simply nodding. The church door creaked open behind him. Valor turned, anticipating the preacher or perhaps one of the few courageous souls willing to witness this spectacle. Instead, he saw her. Lyra Thornwood walked down the aisle with a dignity that constricted his throat. She wasn't the frail old woman he had envisioned. Her graying hair was pulled back tightly, but her green eyes flickered with a fire that caused him to take a step back. Her black dress was plain yet well-tailored, and she carried herself as someone who had endured hardships even more daunting than a forced marriage. She stopped 3 feet away from him and scrutinized his face with an intensity that made him want to vanish. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "You appear as if you'd rather be anywhere else in the world." Valor swallowed hard. "Wouldn't you?" A hint of a smile touched her lips. "I've learned that what we desire and what we require are often distinct things." She drew closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "I'm aware of the rumors circulating about us. I understand what you're thinking, but you know nothing about me. Boy," she added, "and I suspect there's more to you than meets the eye." The preacher cleared his throat from the altar, his Bible open and ready. Sterling Rhodes sat in the front pew, observing them with the smug satisfaction of a man who always obtained what he wanted. Valor felt trapped between his past and an uncertain future, with this enigmatic woman as his only potential ally or formidable adversary. But as Lyra took his arm and led him towards the altar, he noticed something that sent a shiver down his spine. Her hands were trembling just as violently as his. The ceremony lasted precisely 7 minutes. 7 minutes to bind 2 strangers together in an arrangement that satisfied everyone except the bride and groom. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Valor felt like he was suffocating in shallow water. Lyra's lips barely brushed his cheek in their clumsy kiss, yet he smelled lavender soap mingled with another scent. That aroma brought back memories of his mother's garden before the drought erased it. Quicksilver Rhodes slipped up to them at once, his grin as frosty as a January gale. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wainwright. I hope marital life will suit you." He faced Valor, barely hiding his scorn. "The property deed will be filed tomorrow morning. Your debt is paid, but keep our deal in mind. Should you neglect this marriage, I'll call in every other loan your family owes." Valor tightened his jaw. "I gave you my word." "Talk is cheap, kid. Deeds reveal true character." Quicksilver tipped his hat toward Lyra. Madam, I think your husband still has lessons to learn about responsibility. When Quicksilver departed with a smug grin, Valor and Lyra found themselves alone inside the vacant church. A heavy silence hung between them like a gulf neither could bridge. Outside, the wind pounded the panes and dust seeped through the cracks in the walls. "Your place or mine?" Lyra asked, and for an instant Valor thought she was teasing. Yet her face stayed solemn. "I have no home now," he confessed. "I lost it 3 months ago and have been crashing in the barn at Grindstone's ranch, trading odd jobs for food." Lyra gave a nod as though the news surprised her little. "Then you'll stay at my house. It's modest, but it's ours now, I guess." She lingered at the doorway. "There are rules, however. Things you must know before we move forward." Valor trailed her outside to a sturdy wagon waiting nearby. As she settled into the driver's seat with practiced ease, he glimpsed a rifle strapped under the bench. Her motions were assured, as if she were used to relying on herself. "What sort of rules?" he asked, taking a seat beside her. Ka snapped the reins, and the horses lunged ahead. "First rule, don't expect me to cook, clean, or tend to you like hired help. I am not your mother, nor your servant. Second rule, my bedroom door remains locked. We may be legally wed, but that's where it stops, until I choose otherwise." The wagon groaned along the rutted road toward the town's edge. Valor watched her profile, trying to decipher the woman who had just become his wife. "What is the third rule?" Valor stayed silent so long he feared she would never reply. When she finally opened her mouth, her voice was barely a whisper. "Do not ask about my first husband. Some tales are best left buried." Yet as they neared a modest house encircled by an unusually tidy fence, Valor spotted something that made him wonder how many secrets his new wife concealed. The dwelling was a revelation. From the outside, it resembled any other settler's cabin. Its wood was weathered, and its tin roof showed its age. Inside, however, Valor uncovered a world that upended everything he thought he understood about frontier life. Books filled the shelves built into every available wall. These were real books, leather-bound and well cared for, not the cheap paperbacks most people cherished. A piano stood in the corner, its surface gleaming and reflecting the oil lamps. Lyra noticed his gaze. "Surprised? I just didn't expect—" He trailed off, uncertain how to continue without being offensive. "You didn't expect a woman my age living alone to have nice things." There was an edge to her voice that made him choose his words carefully. "I didn't expect anyone out here to have a piano." Lyra placed her hat on a hook by the door and smoothed her hair. "My first husband believed education was the only wealth that couldn't be stolen." She moved through the room with familiar grace, lighting lamps and adjusting curtains. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. There's a washstand and clean linens." Valor climbed the narrow stairs, his boots echoing in the silence. The room she'd given him was simple but clean. A bed, a dresser, and a window that overlooked the back of the property. He sat heavily on the mattress and put his head in his hands. This morning, he'd been a free man. Tonight, he was married to a stranger who owned more books than he'd ever seen and played piano like some kind of lady from back east. The sound of music drifted up from below. Lyra was playing something slow and melancholy, her fingers moving across the keys with the confidence of years of practice. Valor found himself drawn to the top of the stairs, listening to the haunting melody that seemed to fill every corner of the house. The music stopped abruptly. "Are you planning to stand there all evening, or are you going to come down and eat?" Embarrassed at being caught, Valor descended the stairs. Ka had set out cold beef, bread and preserves on the kitchen table. She poured coffee from a pot that smelled better than anything he'd tasted in months. "You play beautifully," he said, settling across from her. "I had a good teacher." Her tone suggested the conversation was closed, but Valor pressed forward anyway. "Who taught you?" Lyra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Someone who's been dead for, years." She resumed eating with deliberate focus, but Valor caught something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Fear. Before he could ask another question, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Lyra moved to the window and peered through the curtains, her body tensing like a cat preparing to bolt. "Get upstairs," she whispered urgently. "Now." But it was too late. Heavy boots stomped across the porch, and someone pounded on the door with enough force to rattle the frame. "Cora Maddox, we know you're in there." The voice was rough, demanding with an accent that sounded like it came from somewhere back east. "Open this door before we break it down." Lyra's face had gone pale, but her movements were swift and precise. She snatched the rifle from under the kitchen counter and inspected the chambers with expert ease. "A rear exit runs through the pantry," she murmured to Valor. "Follow the trail past the chicken coop. It goes straight to Grindstone's house. I won't abandon you with whoever is out there. You don't get it. These fellows aren't after you. They're pursuing something from way back, an incident unrelated to our agreement." A loud bang rattled the house once more. "Please, Valor, just leave." Yet the fear in her gaze and the slight quiver of her hands, even as her words stayed firm, caused him to refuse. "We're husband and wife now, right? In sickness and in health, as the preacher vowed." He positioned himself next to her. "What is it they seek?" Before Lyra could respond, the door burst open violently. 3 strangers forced their way past the shattered wood. Their attire was caked with trail dust. The one in charge stood tall and slender, his frigid stare locking onto Lyra instantly. His grin hinted at agony. "There you are, Mrs. Gareth Thornwood. Or perhaps Mrs. Seraphina Glenmore." Valor sensed Lyra tense up against him. Seraphina Glenmore. That wasn't the surname listed on their wedding paperwork. "I have no idea what you mean," Lyra replied, though her tone wavered. The intruder chuckled. "We've hunted you for 5 long years, Seraphina. 5 years after you vanished with an item that wasn't yours." He finally spotted Valor. "And this one?" "Your latest bodyguard." "I'm her spouse," Valor declared, astonished by the firmness of his reply. "Spouse?" The fellow's brows lifted. "How sentimental. Have you filled him in about Philadelphia, Seraphina? Or the bank? What you snatched during your escape?" Lyra aimed the rifle upward. Her grip remained sure despite the turmoil. "Leave my home at once. Our boss demands the return of what's his. The funds you pilfered, the papers you duplicated. We're certain you've stashed them." He advanced a pace. "Simplify matters for you and your fresh partner." Thoughts spun through Valor's head. Pilfered cash. Important records. What woman had he wed just hours prior? The headman's fingers inched toward his firearm. "You have 10 seconds to choose, Seraphina. The simple path, or one that makes your new groom a widower on the eve of his union." That moment marked Lyra's act that redefined Valor's perception of bravery. Lyra unleashed a cautionary bullet into the overhead, causing wood fragments to shower everyone below. The blast echoed loudly within the tight quarters, prompting all 3 to crouch instinctively. Rather than escalate the menace, she took an utterly unforeseen step. She set down the weapon and grinned. "Curious about Philadelphia, gentlemen? Or the alleged theft?" Her voice calmed, adopting a chatty tone. In that case, let's discuss it respectfully, as decent folk. The leader rose gradually, fingers lingering near his sidearm. What game are you playing at, Seraphina? There's no game, only the truth. Lyra took a seat at the kitchen table, positioning the rifle within her grasp. Valor, please pour these men some coffee. They've journeyed quite a distance. Valor gazed at her, as if she were out of her mind. Coffee? Trust me, she calmly insisted, and the tone of her voice compelled him to comply. As Valor nervously filled 3 cups, Lyra fixed her gaze on the leader. Your boss is Lorian Alatar, isn't he? Still sore about losing his bank. The man's eyes narrowed in response. Mr. Alatar wants his $50,000 back. 50,000? Lyra chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Is that what he claimed I took? How intriguing. She sipped her coffee leisurely, while the 3 men stood, uncertain how to respond to this unanticipated turn of events. Tell me, did Lorian mention that the money belonged to the Dakota Territory Land Office? He was laundering it through his bank to steal homestead claims. Valor nearly dropped the coffee pot. $50,000 was more than most people encountered in their entire lives. You're lying, the leader asserted, though doubt crept into his tone. Am I? Did he explain why I worked at his bank? Why would a woman with my background settle for a clerk's position in Philadelphia? Lyra's green eyes burned fiercely. Because my husband, the true Gareth Thornwood, died while probing into Lorian Alatar's illegal land schemes. He died under mysterious circumstances after asking too many questions about missing federal funds. The leader's companions exchanged glances. This was not the account they had been given. I didn't steal anything, Lyra continued. I recovered evidence of federal crimes, evidence that's been stored in a safety deposit box in Denver for 5 years, awaiting the perfect moment to emerge. You're bluffing, the leader retorted, but his confidence was faltering. Lyra rose and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. Maybe I am. Or perhaps Lorian Alatar sent you here to eliminate the one individual capable of proving he's been robbing the United States government. She turned back to face them. The question is, gentlemen, are you willing to hang for murder when all of this comes to light? At that moment, Valor realized his wife was not just guarding stolen money. She was safeguarding evidence that could dismantle one of the territory's most influential figures. The leader's expression darkened as Lyra's words penetrated his mind. You expect us to believe Lorian Alatar is some sort of criminal mastermind. He's one of Philadelphia's most esteemed businessmen. Esteemed individuals have committed the worst atrocities in history, Lyra countered, especially when they feel invulnerable. She stepped closer to the trio, her initial fears seemingly replaced by something far more formidable. Tell me, how much is he paying you for this task? A few hundred? 1,000? That's none of your concern, the leader barked. It matters when you're endangering your lives for scraps, while he's pilfered enough to purchase a small city. Lyra's voice fell to a near whisper. Do you honestly believe that Lorian intends to let you survive after you give him his evidence? Having seen him, you're aware of what he does. Those who are dead don't get paid or share tales. Valor watched the discussion with increasing surprise. The woman he had wed was taking apart these menacing men using just words and rationale. The 2 partners shifted with unease, now rethinking their position. She's a liar, the leader stated, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Don't listen to her. Am I really? Lyra moved to a bookshelf and took out a leather-bound book. This was owned by my husband. Every element of Alatar's scheme is written down here. Names, dates, sums taken from the purchasing of federal land, and even the names of government employees accepting payoffs. She began reading aloud from the journal, which was now open. June 15th, 1869. Alatar put $12,000 from government accounts into his personal savings. The payment was marked as fees for consulting about services for evaluating land that never happened. One of the partners took a step in her direction. Let me look at that. Finn, no, the leader warned. But Finn was reading over Lyra's shoulder. His face suddenly lost color. Boss, Governor Falconer and Judge Everglyn both signed this. Lyra said in a quiet voice, If this is legitimate, it's legitimate. What's more, there are over 40 more entries that are similar. Lorian Alatar has consistently taken federal money meant to aid settlers in laying claim to their land. The funds were intended to construct schools, develop wells, and establish legislation in new areas. Valor felt queasy. He had believed that his family's financial difficulties were the worst possible thing. This, however, was more significant than ranches lost or alliances formed under duress. The betrayal affected countless innocent families. Their leader pulled out his weapon. Enough. Journal or no journal. We have our instructions. Give back what you stole from Philadelphia, or we'll shoot. However, before anyone could respond, the sound of numerous horses racing toward the house caused everyone to stop moving. Valor could see lights moving in the dark through the window. Expecting reinforcement? The leader questioned icily. Lyra's expression had become pale. They aren't allies, she said softly. That is actually Lorian Alatar. The sound of boots hitting the porch this time was distinct, louder and more measured. Lorian Alatar didn't bother to knock. He simply came through the already damaged door as if claiming ownership, which he probably believed he did given his riches and influence. Valor had been bracing himself for a monster. However, the man who walked in was disappointingly typical. Average height, hair turning gray, and costly attire that identified him as someone who had never missed a meal or rested on the hard earth. Only his eyes revealed the cruelty that had created his empire of stolen funds and devastated people. Seraphina, Alatar greeted, removing his hat with false courtesy. You are looking good. The rural lifestyle suits you. The three hired hands suddenly appeared anxious, realizing that they were no longer the most dangerous individuals present. Their commander moved ahead. Mr. Alatar, we were merely discussing the restitution of your belongings. Were you? Alatar spoke with a smooth yet edged tone. And how did that turn out? She asserts the cash originated from federal sources. She says she possesses proof of your commercial activities. Alatar laughed, genuinely entertained. Evidence? My dear Seraphina? Surely you understand that proof only matters when an authority figure is prepared to act on it. And I've taken great care to prevent that from happening. Lyra gripped the journal tighter. Judge Everglyn could dissent. Governor Falconer might also dissent once they see their signatures on documents exposing their corruption. Everglyn passed away last month. It was a sudden heart attack. Alatar's smile turned icy. And Governor Falconer, well, let's just say he has become far more lenient about ignoring certain financial irregularities in the territory. Valor sensed the atmosphere change. The hired men retreated toward the exit, clearly unwilling to participate in whatever was about to unfold. Even they possessed boundaries. "You killed Everglyn," Lyra whispered. "I haven't killed anyone. But people under pressure sometimes succumb to ill health." Alatar stepped nearer, his presence filling the cramped kitchen. "Now, regarding that evidence and the $50,000 you stole from my personal safe. It wasn't your money to start with. Possession is 9/10 of the law, dear, and I hold the law across 3 territories." Alatar gestured toward his men with a nod. "Search the house. Ransack it if needed." Yet as the men advanced to comply, Valor performed an act that froze them instantly. She ignited a match and held it just shy of the leather-bound journal. One more move, and 5 years of evidence would turn to ash. Alatar's composure cracked for the first time. "You wouldn't dare. That journal is your sole safeguard." "Is it?" Lyra's eyes burned with resolve. "Or is it the very thing preventing you from killing us all right now?" The flame edged nearer to her fingers, and Valor realized his wife was ready to ruin everything, rather than let Lorien Alatar prevail. The flame reached Lyra's fingertips, yet she remained unshaken. Instead, she smiled at Lorien Alatar with the calm confidence of someone who holds all the cards. "Did I mention this isn't the only copy?" Alatar's face paled. "What?" "My husband was thorough. He produced 3 copies of everything before he died. One resides in the safety deposit box in Denver. Another was sent to a federal investigator in Washington 6 months ago. She allowed the match to extinguish and let it fall to the floor. This journal is merely my personal reminder of what you took from me." Valor watched, astonished, as Alatar's meticulously built world began to collapse. The hired men were already edging toward the exit, realizing they'd been deceived and exploited. "You're bluffing," Alatar said, though his voice lacked conviction. Lyra moved to the kitchen window and gestured outward. "See those riders coming? Those are Federal Marshal Tom Eldrin and his deputies. I sent a message to Denver yesterday regarding our wedding, informing them that if anything were to happen to me or my new husband, they should look into Lorien Alatar without delay." Through the window, Valor noticed torches moving steadily toward the house. 6 riders advanced, with the deliberate demeanor of law enforcement. Alatar turned sharply to face his hired men. "Eliminate them both now." However, the 3 men were already retreating. "We didn't agree to assassinate federal witnesses," the leader protested. "Look for other fools to do that." They vanished into the darkness, leaving Alatar consumed by rage and desperation. He pulled out his gun, but his hands trembled with fury. "If I'm going down, you're going down with me, Seraphina." Valor acted instinctively, placing himself between Alatar and Valor just as the gun discharged. The bullet struck him in the shoulder, knocking him around, yet he remained upright. Valor caught him as he wavered, her strong arms providing support. Marshal Eldrin burst through the door alongside his deputies, weapons raised. "Drop the weapon, Alatar." Alatar scanned the room, witnessing his empire crumbling before his eyes. For a brief moment, Valor thought he might yield. Instead, he aimed the gun at his own head. "Lorien Alatar, you're under arrest for the theft of federal funds and conspiracy to defraud the United States government," Eldrin declared as he kicked the weapon away. 3 months later, Valor found himself in the same kitchen, his arm fully healed from the bullet wound. The atmosphere felt different now, filled with laughter rather than secrets. Lyra was at the piano, playing a joyful tune, while sunlight poured through the pristine windows. "Any regrets?" she asked, glancing up from the keys. Valor reflected on everything that had transpired. Lorien Alatar was serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. The $50,000 had been returned to the territorial government and utilized to establish schools across 3 counties, and Sterling Rhodes had unexpectedly chosen to forgive all of Valor's family debts following federal investigators' examination of his business practices. "Just one," Valor replied as he stepped closer to his wife. "What is it?" "I wish I had realized sooner what an extraordinary woman I was marrying." He gently caressed her face. "Seraphina Glenmore was courageous, but Lyra Wainwright is truly remarkable." She leaned into his touch. "Some stories conclude more beautifully than they begin." Outside their window, the land stretched endlessly toward the horizon, filled with opportunities neither of them had dared to imagine on their wedding day. If this story touched you, give it a like and tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were in their shoes? Subscribe to Frontier Stories and join us as we continue to tell stories of hope, resilience, and the beautiful, messy truth of Wild West.